Yesterday, we briefly covered the sad news that the substation will permanently close in July. Haryanto, do you have any memories of the place?
I actually do. I remember going there with my friends when we were younger to catch bands performing, local indie bands performing. And it's just a nice area, right, where, all of us, we just go there in your younger days to just kind of like hang out and just check out the local arts scene.
For sure. Well, judging by reactions that we have seen on the substation's Facebook post announcing its closure, your sentiments, were echoed by many.
Some talked about how the venue is an institution to the Singapore arts scene, while others reminisced about starting their artistic journey there. For example, local film director and screenwriter Kirsten Tan said she's in awe of how a single arts institute like the Substation could do so much for all artists across all forms, but she knows why it can't continue.
Right. Well, Fazrin Effendi remembered the punk rock gigs when he was a teen and the film screenings when he was a young adult before wishing Godspeed Substation.
And Johan Lim thanked the staff past and present for keeping the substation running.
Well, the Straits Times' senior culture correspondent Ong Sofen is here to weigh in. So Sofen, disappointment, sadness, those are the common reactions that we've been seeing online. How about the arts community? How have they responded to the substation's closure?
I think it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say there's actual grief at the news, because a lot of people are very upset by this. And like Haryanto mentioned, it's not just the arts community, it's the film and the music veterans who remember how important the substation was in the early 90s when everyone was just starting out. And I think for some people in the arts community, they were also very upset because there's actually a grassroots move to try and help to save the substation.
We talk about places and how it has an impact as well, right? So what is the impact of the substation's permanent closure on Singapore's arts scene?
Well, I think that the substation has always been as much about its symbolic significance as well as being a place for art making. Because when Hua Baokun started it in 1990, he's a very open-minded art maker. So I think that the impact of his ideas created this very powerful mythos around the substation. So it was, for the first 20 years, it was actually a very vibrant and very chaotic refuge for art makers of all stripes. There were serious theatre makers, there were punk rockers, there were street artists. So that is actually a very powerful space. And I think a lot of people might think that Singapore now is very advanced, that the substation has lost its relevance. But I think that the substation represents a venue for experimentation. It is very important as a place where artists feel free to fail as well as to experiment. And it's also been a safe space for difficult conversations to take place. And if you are going to close that substation space, I think it will be very, very difficult to create another space with the same cultural cachet as the substation has.
Right. Well, the substation board, it said that while the National Arts Council welcomed the substation back to the venue post-renovation, it will be one of several co-tenants and will not occupy the building in its full capacity. Another contributing factor to the closure, of course, is, COVID-19, which has made fundraising especially difficult. So, Sofen, what do you make of the reasons for the closure?
I think that those are valid reasons, but I think there are other contributing factors in the past 10 decades because the programming has not been as exciting. I think the marketing and the comm strategy has not kept up with the times, which might have helped the substation retain audiences and find sponsorship, which could have alleviated its current problems. But I also think that the board needs to take some responsibility for the closure as well, because announcing that it's going to close now is kind of like what I would call the nuclear option. It's kind of like blowing everything up. There is still time for the substation to consider what it's going to do, because there's 4 months till it has to move out in July. And after it closes in July, there is still 2 years worth of renovations that has to happen before the substation can move back into the space. in any shape or form. So I think the board hasn't considered all the options, and the arts community has also started to rally around the substation. So their support could actually help the substation find new solutions rather than just close down like that.
Sophan, I know you mentioned this earlier quite briefly in your previous answer, but I just have to ask again, is there a chance that the substation can restart somewhere else while still retaining its dual roles as an incubator for the arts as well as a venue for indie bands to perform?
I think Pao Kun himself said that there is no reason why the substation should be tied to a bricks and mortar building. But for me, I think that to a certain extent, the substation, if it moves out of that building, is kind of like an amputation because it's so tied to that space. But I also think that there are other solutions. The substation could move to like a warehouse space or create black box spaces elsewhere. But to me, at least, I've grown up with the substation, so I think that that space has a kind of a power to it. And I think it's also ironic that Singapore, now that the National Arts Council says that, they are very fond of boasting that Singapore has got so many arts events throughout the year and that we are a thriving arts scene, but we can't even save one tiny space in the heart of the civic district, which hosts so much memories and heritage for the art scene.